Welcome to Exiles, a Gospel of Mark podcast. We're coming to you from Grace Church in Erie, Pennsylvania, where we're taking what we learn about ancient truths and the person of Jesus into our everyday life. You can check out whoisgrace.com/Mark for the sermon and resources we're using for our conversation. Thanks for joining us today for Season 5, our final season. In this section of Mark, the end is just the beginning. We're going to pick up where we left off in this greatest of stories, following Jesus through his final days in Jerusalem, learning alongside the disciples that his blood must be poured out for many, and that the good news of his resurrection must be proclaimed to the whole world. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
Full disclosure, we're filming this on a different day. You know what that means. This might be weird. Might be odd. Okay, so we are talking about the high priest Sanhedrin and the the secret trials of Jesus. And Pastor Sarah started her sermon talking about the Constitution and the Fifth Amendment, and so it got me thinking.
Oh no!
I know. Do any of you?
Scottish.
I plead the fifth.
I'm Scottish. I don't care.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
First of all, have you
You
ever
get
had
that
to plead the
reference?
fifth?
It's not church appropriate.
Anybody into any like true crime documentaries or anything? Seen any good ones or any of them? Have you watched any and they stick with you?
Like CSI and
sure,
and
or like-
CSI,
Are you talking like real, like,
Yeah,
True
like
life.
unsolved crime or like
well,
trial dramas and stuff
Nicole's
like that.
she's a bit of a true crime snob, so
I believe that.
It doesn't like
what's her
necessarily
Grip you?
does she have like,
check my box, but like Netflix
Yeah.
documentaries. We just watched that Gabby Petito one, the domestic
She like,
violence
lied
ones.
about.
No, but we did watch that
I
one.
think
she
I
showed back
saw
up again.
that.
Oh, that was
On
the
my
one who got
list.
like on the road trip, got
Yeah,
lost.
the domestic violence.
Oh yeah, I
victim.
saw that. The
Lost.
vlogger.
Yeah, the
that was
vlogger.
weird.
Yeah, that was
all about
that was
that.
a weird one for sure.
Yeah, that was the one where they thought the parents like were into on.
They were totally
Which
in
they
on
were.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. So that's my relationship
Yeah.
with them through my wife by proxy.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
we're currently in the one that's called Scamanda on Hulu.
That's the one where she tricked
They-
everybody and got a bunch
She
of money.
said she had
Yeah.
cancer and she was like really active
Oh,
in
is
her
this the apple,
church.
apple cider vinegar one?
That's a different one.
That's a different one. Okay.
She was like really active in her church and she claimed that she had cancer and she had a blog, like the
That
whole
happened
bit,
at Grace once.
thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars
Wow.
that she took. But they wouldn't release them all at once, so I had to wait till every Thursday to see it.
Oh,
Like,
that's disgusting.
Release the files, guys.
That's right.
Just
What is
release
this, the
it.
2000s? Like,
Jeez, oh man.
I was like,
but I'm curious about this real life true
I don't know how much I
crime.
can go into it,
Oh,
but
okay,
it
okay.
happened a long time ago, like 38th Street. Someone, it was,
Okay.
they were like, I think I can say the story without saying. They did that. They were kind of like, I have cancer, blah blah blah. It went on for weeks and weeks.
Yeah.
Offerings, fundraisers.
yes. They literally, there's one part, not to be a
Wow.
spoiler for this, if everyone wants to watch it, but like there's a scene where, and it was very much a church like Grace, like a large
sure.
church,
Yeah.
and the pastor felt compelled to bring them on stage and do like an on-spot
Same.
offering. And they came up on the stage and people literally are just coming up and throwing money like at their feet.
Oh boy.
It's
Whoa.
bonkers.
Oh boy.
Watch it.
Wow.
Scamanda. I think that's, but it
Thank
goes through
you,
the
Sarah.
whole thing. And so that's the latest story.
Did the guy? I'm just googling it right now, but Mike Pilavachi. Do you remember that?
No. What is
That was the same. Mike Pilavachi was. Remember that song? I believe you're my healer. I believe.
Yes. The hill, yeah, not
the
the, hill
Planet
song, but-
Shakers
Yes,
guy.
Planet Shakers. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Pilavachi was.
That was
huge.
wild.
I think he said he had brain cancer or something like that, and went on this whole tour.
He had like an oxygen tank. He
Had
would
an
go out and
oxygen
sing.
tank,
And
yeah.
he
It was
didn't have
fake.
anything
It was all
wrong with him.
fake.
Wow.
It's
I'll buy in.
amazing. Like, and they were even
That
said,
was bad.
that
it's
rocked
amazing
me
what
for
you
sure.
can just buy, like online,
Rocked
and
me.
just like
It did.
tape
It was
and hook up.
sc- it was-
And people will just like make random trips to the ER
Yeah.
and take like random, like just take their photos of being in the bed and then leave.
That is wild.
But you can just buy anything online and just tape it to yourself.
Oh,
that easy.
All right.
It's
No.
crazy. Maybe I
Crazy
should-
what people will
Exiles tip of the day. How to defraud a community.
It's, I mean,
It is-
Mike,
it is
true
wild,
crime?
though.
So,
Documentaries,
my
Justice
name is Mike, I'm one of
Complex?
the pastors here.
you.
No, I don't watch much of the true crime. So my wife, God love her, does not like drama in the
That's a really bad
slightest.
way to preface anything about your wife.
God
My
love-
wife,
God
God
loves
love her.
God love her. Someone's got to.
She can't handle
God and Danielle.
the slightest amount of drama or suspense in any sort of
what happens?
cinematic experience. I haven't watched.
She's such an angel.
I
isn't
haven't
she?
watched anything that would like it be
What are you
dramatic
watching?
in 10
Just like
years of
Nicholas
marriage.
Sparks movies? What do you-
Disney Plus and
Oh, wow.
well,
You can
that's
get
for
some
the
stuff
kids,
on
but-
Disney Plus nowadays.
Well,
I can
it's
see
true.
that, though. I can see that.
So like when we go on like a flight like across the Atlantic and you got all the movies, oh my goodness,
Your
I'm doing
earphones
action
are on, you're
movies,
like,
I'm
oh,
doing drama
that's
movies,
funny.
I'm doing, and she won't even like look at my
Does she
screen.
even get
It's-
like upset during like rom-com like drama?
sometimes depending on the rom-com?
Like the
'Cause then
story's
she
going
like
haywire.
She just doesn't want the tension.
she's very like emotive and like very like
Empathetic.
what's the word like the things that go on in her environment like affect
Empathetic.
her empathetic
Yeah.
and so she's like I can't sleep and blah 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 and I'm over here snoring. So no, so I haven't watched a true crime. Can tell you the last time.
I just, it was the last week or the week before, I watched the Lacey Peterson.
Oh,
That's an
retrospective.
oldie. That's,
Do you
that's
remember?
It's like 20 years ago.
But they just came out with the like info on it. Like more info on it or whatever. They kind of like
Is he
go
out of jail
through.
yet?
No. No.
they
And I
keep
didn't know.
like
That sounds familiar.
So
give me the
he
preface again.
had a wife. She was pregnant. All of a sudden, she was missing, and he acted like she was missing. And then he had a mistress. He took her.
Oh, yeah.
Someone
It's like a canoe
took her
or
out
something.
on a boat. He bought a boat.
Yes.
Like a couple weeks
This
ahead
was
of
like
time.
Like,
2000.
like he was
So
handsome, she was
wow.
pretty,
Or
like the
something
whole.
crazy.
And he was in the news and
Yeah.
helping search for her and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But he
yeah.
never hardly ever talked to the press. The reason I
Right.
thought of it is he hardly ever talked to the press, and he pled the fifth for the whole
Yeah.
thing. But they had audio recordings of him talking to his mistress,
Right.
so like you could.
I
It's
remember.
almost like he testified
That's Netflix,
against himself.
right?
I think it was Netflix.
Yeah.
Netflix, yeah.
I've seen that one.
But it made me think about pleading the fifth and just like
I love a good docuseries. Ugh.
sometimes though, like when people plead the fifth, I'm automatically like, if I was on the jury, I'd be like
Guilty.
guilty. But that's not
literally
necessarily
not
true.
supposed to. That's unfair, yeah.
Like in Jesus' case, obviously.
Yeah.
But like sometimes it's like maybe you're just too nervous, or you'll cry, or you like won't.
Or
Yeah,
you don't
might
present well.
Indict yourself.
Yeah, you might just say something stupid
Yeah.
because you're nervous or whatever. Anywho, thanks for
On
taking that rainbow
No.
journey with me.
And please, anyone who's listening, if you have ones that you recommend, please tell us what they are. Because I
after the
will.
digital fast, which we are in right now, but we're
That's
not in
right.
today.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
It starts
wow.
tomorrow.
That's right.
For us, when we're recording this, the fast starts tomorrow.
So we
Well, it doesn't mean you're giving up TV, I guess. Everyone's doing all
we
different
may have
kinds of
just
things.
True,
caused people
yep.
to stumble. So apologies for that.
Sorry.
Because
I didn't even think about
this
that.
will air when
Write it on a
It'll air a
piece of
couple
paper
weeks
later.
with a
Yes,
pen
right?
and put it away in your drawer and
Yeah.
watch it.
that paper and
Pencil.
pen that you're
On
using
April
right
1st.
now.
I wrote the pencil.
Well, okay, let's take this opportunity.
Get ready to binge
If
once
you're-
it's over.
How did we get to Ash Wednesday?
If
already? I
you
don't know.
are listening to this and you're doing the digital fast, hopefully you've,
Don't feel convicted.
I'm sorry, but hopefully you've taken stock and you've made the decisions ahead of time what you're going to do. And if, we're all doing all different kinds of things.
And
probably.
if you relapse, then send email to Danielle.
Yeah,
Let her know.
I'll help you.
Relapse.
I'll help
I
you.
like the word choice is ideal. Relapse.
Sorry, guys. All right, let's get into the sermon, which is why we're here. A sermon and positive application for life instead of what we just did. Okay.
Okay.
All right. These are so the context, like I said, were with the high priest and the Sanhedrin. Basically during their like mock trial in the middle of the night. Any just context thoughts, setting thoughts?
I like how she brought up about how she was like, and he just happened to be awake.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And like all these people are just available.
And all the 70 were just like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that either. Like,
I
oh,
never thought about that.
hey, let's have a middle of the night
I'm like,
trial.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Like,
Obviously planned out and premeditated.
Yep.
Yeah.
very intentional.
I would agree. That was my thought too. So, great.
Crappy all.
All three had the same thought.
Yes.
Concur.
I said that the other day too. I love that word.
Concur.
I concur.
Sarah also reminded us, really, when you get to the heart of it, it wasn't some truth-seeking mission that they were on. It was,
The verdict was predetermined.
it was predetermined. It was a grab for power and control, and however you want to frame it. And she asked this question. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week, but like, what happens in a confrontation when we come up against something or someone that won't back down? And she kind of used that to set up the fact that we have to, at some point, all of us respond to Jesus, respond to who he is. And that's the framework for the sermon. So it's real simple. Confronting the claims of Jesus, it's either a lie or the truth.
The truth.
So let's talk about the lies. How the Sanhedrin, how the high priest tried to lie.
I thought what was interesting as I was listening, the likening it back to Genesis 2, Genesis 3 in the garden, when the play on God's words, when Satan plays on God's words, he didn't tell you to touch it,
Yeah.
But God didn't say you can't touch the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He just said don't eat from it. And then it was just that sort of like that play on words again that Mark identified as well. I thought that was interesting. That's kind of where my brain was going as I was listening to that.
It is wild, I think, how much that is part of his playbook. Even today,
Yeah.
Like
and his playbook, but even our playbook as well. Like those small choices to add or remove context or truth.
To fit your narrative.
Yeah, to fit a narrative. And it's so easily done.
Yeah.
It's all these sort of half-truths, I think. But sometimes it's like 90% true, and it's 10%
Those are the
untrue.
most dangerous.
Those are the most dangerous.
Oh,
And the
they
ones
make-
that are
yeah.
easy enough to blind yourself, especially when you're speaking it to yourself. You can get 90% of the way there, 10% of a lie,
Well,
but you can blind yourself. Oh, great.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the danger of that. Like, I wonder in that council, maybe they were all against Jesus, and maybe it's not right for us to sort of try to, contextualize this, but I
Right.
just wonder, like, were there any who were, they maybe felt the power of, or the oppression of Rome.
Right,
but they're-
absolutely.
Like, I think in Nicodemus.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah, good
Um,
example, yeah.
He's sitting there, he feels the power and the pressure, but he also can't deny what he knows, what he's seen, what he's experienced.
Right.
But he still bends the knee to the majority and allows the false narrative to play out.
That's another. I'd be curious, and I very much appreciated. I guess it's back to what you were asking earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
The kind of the lead in that Sarah had with, yes, there was Rome, but then there's also the Caiaphas, the high priest, and the Sanhedrin, and they had some limited autonomy, but on certain things not. And so they were feeling the pinch between this is the system where they kind of have power and authority and
Right.
autonomy, and this is a disruptor trying to upset the apple cart. How are we going to walk this line?
Yeah, like we can control this, we can't control
Right.
this
Yeah.
other
And that's
thing.
where
Yeah.
they were feeling. And then, so and maybe I need to do my own study here, but Nicodemus was in there. He
Had to
was
have been.
one of the Sanhedrin.
Yeah.
He sought Jesus out. John tells us that
In
had a
secret, by the way.
in a
Yeah.
secret midnight meeting.
That must have been their thing.
So Nicodemus is sitting there,
Love
and
being
there
up in
was
the middle of the
there's I'm forgetting. There's somebody else. There's at least I think at least two scripturally people who were, I imagine, were in that room.
Probably.
Wouldn't have voted to did they vote to condemn
Yeah.
that? Ooh, those are interesting questions to ask.
I mean, was there
Go
even
pull
a
the
vote?
ballots and
I know
see.
there was a vote, but was there a vote?
Well, was there a vote? Was it
This is a
simply
mob.
just
At this point, I doubt it.
Right. Did it descend into mob? And then what did Nicodemus feel being in there and watching, like, how do you process that in real life? And much less Peter outside seeing Jesus let
Well, isn't that weird too? Like, or maybe there were rules around it. Like, would Peter have been allowed in? Would his followers been allowed in as like witnesses?
Probably in this particular setting, I would say no.
Yeah, probably not.
Given the fact that it's in the middle of the night.
That'd be so wild to be sitting out there and hearing it.
I say,
And
like,
just-
how open was everything? Like,
I mean, it's not like they had windows. You know,
Yeah.
like,
But even then, there was definitely some people there who
yeah. That's a good
I would
point.
imagine wouldn't have voted to condemn. There were obviously a clear number of them who had already had that predetermined verdict. What if you were in neither camp and you're sitting there and you hear the witness after witness after witness, and their testimony falls apart again and again
I know.
and again? Like, if you're thinking clearly, you're like, this idiot Caiaphas here, like,
Right.
what's going on here? What am I?
why can't you see this?
This isn't lining up.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be a fly on that wall.
My thought thinks as well. Yeah, I mean, to today as well, in the world we live in right now. But it's like, how how quickly can we be bought by the majority, even if the majority isn't true? And I feel like that's kind of what's going on in this situation as well. And again, it may have been 100%. I doubt that it was. That would have been consensus, you know, or conceded. But that just when I think about truth and lies, and I mean, obviously we live in a world that is just, you know, saturated with lies. Yeah. But how easy it is. It's so much easier to follow the majority, even if that is not the right
because
direction.
it feels too big to change the mind of the majority.
Yeah.
As a single person or a smaller group. And it's fearful. You're fearful to go against the majority. Like how could I possibly win this? It's me against a slew of, you know, others. And that's overwhelming. And that's super generous of you. Cause also it's, like when you look to things that happen nowadays, like a ministry falls down or governmental stuff happens and you find out later, really what you find out is they didn't say anything because they didn't say anything because they didn't, because all of this is security and hierarchy and power and leading to, or if I vote against them, I'm not going to be part of this anymore. Right. So what am I going to do for money? What am I going to do for my life? What's going to make me significant?
But are those all lies that are getting... Yeah, those are lies insulating the lies. Right. Well, I can't do anything, or if I do say something or take my stand, then my livelihood falls apart. And is that actually objectively true? Maybe, but maybe not. But does that paralyze us from confronting that's good. The lies?
It is interesting as you think about the megachurch movements that have fallen over the last 2 decades.
It's never like... every single person's like so shocked.
Yeah, right.
It's usually like,
Yeah,
we did this and we thought this was the right thing and we thought this was the right thing. Well, okay.
Actually, if you want a church version of a true crime, the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill Church,
that's a good example.
Yeah,
that traced all that stuff. But that's a good example.
Yeah.
Oh, really? But it was there was many.
Guys, stop bringing up entertainment during the digital fact.
That's a podcast. It's a podcast. Yeah. But it's never... Sarah presents it very black and white. And in this case, there are clearly moments where there is black and white choices. Yeah. But it's insulated by so many other events and people and words. And
But I even think that, and I don't even know if we're going in the direction you want us to, Danielle, but I even think about that particular context.
We rarely are.
We rarely are. It's true.
The ship sailed.
Here we are, you know, in the context of... trying to maintain some level of, control, but maybe stability within the Jewish nation, knowing that they are oppressed, or at least controlled by the Roman Empire at that time. So as to not upset the apple cart, it's even possible to communicate, like from the Sanhedrin standpoint, it's even possible for them to communicate good intentions in the reasons for doing this. Yeah. And so it's not necessarily, it's hard for the average person to discern, I guess, is what I'm saying. You know, because as Jesus stands with Pontius Pilate before, you know, he basically hands them over to the crowd to decide, there is potentially this underlying narrative that the Sanhedrin is indeed just trying to maintain and protect the rights, the limited rights that we have. And in order to not upset that, we need to vote against Jesus. Yeah. Even if those people who are waving palm branches 7 days before believe in their heart that this is actually the Messiah. It's amazing that you could long for something your entire life, but be afraid to give up that which you have in the moment. I don't know. Maybe I'm going too deep.
Did they think they were doing the best, safest thing? We're maybe protecting everybody with those palm branches because they don't know if they keep doing this thing with this Jesus guy, then Rome's going to come crush us. Yeah. Did they talk themselves into that?
I don't know if it was genuine on their part, but I'm saying it's easy for them to communicate a narrative that feels genuine to the majority. Right.
And could there have been a couple who thought that they were doing the best thing for the Jewish nation?
Oh, I'm sure there were 50 different...
But that blinded them from being able to objectively look at Jesus and go, boy, is he speaking lies or truth right now? Yeah. That's fascinating.
Apparently, Jesus was silent during most of this, obviously. And we know some of that was prophetic and it needed to happen that way. I liked Sarah made a point, and she said she just had a thought, like maybe in addition to all that, he like had already said everything he needed to say. So it's not like anything else he would say would be different. You know, I mean, it ended up being different a little bit at the end there, but
We just want to let them all make fools of themselves. With
Yeah.
all these, like who got brought in? Like the beggar on the street. Like here's a silver coin to just say this about Jesus,
Right.
or
the false
yeah.
testimonies.
the false testimonies. And Jesus
also,
like
by the way, they were doing this on a day they shouldn't have been doing anything.
Yeah.
Passover evening.
It's like,
Which didn't they also
please-
like
yeah, like,
make
please.
us think about?
it's all messed up.
Well, and that's a good point. So even if, all right, let's give them some benefit of the doubt here. Like, all right, they wanted to protect the Jewish nation, and they thought getting rid of Jesus keeps them from Rome coming in and da-da-da. But they went about it in a way that included getting false testimonies, that included breaking one of the most key religious, observances.
Ironically, a charge would probably be brought against Jesus because he was accused for
Yes,
working on the Sabbath.
Right.
And then the hypocrisy, capital punishment for someone who hadn't done something worthy of capital punishment. So they, even if they had said
it's
we're
nuts.
protecting, they're glossing over all of these injustices in order to quote unquote maybe achieve justice or peace or safety. Maybe that should be a good red flag. Of, am I doing the right thing if I'm willing to?
How much do I have to stack up?
Correct.
Yeah.
To turn my nose at what I
Yeah.
might be doing.
That's a good thought. It's pretty dark.
It's dark.
Because now I'm like, when have I done that? Ignored these minor, quote unquote, minor things in order for this greater good.
Yes.
But that's not actually how the kingdom of God works.
Nope, sure isn't.
The silence was really difficult for me. I even think about this when I even watch like a movie, for example, and you're watching someone be falsely accused. And I think to myself, if I was being like wrong place, wrong time. This is like, I think something we all think about at some point. Wrong place one time, my hair happened to fall somewhere and I got arrested for something that had nothing to do with
You've
me.
thought about this before. Yeah.
Nothing to
Why
do
do
with
we
me.
have your
and
hair
I
at the
got-
scene?
yeah. And I got arrested. The panic that I would feel of being wrongfully accused and like you watch people go through like court and you're sitting there and you know you're innocent. How are people able to sit there and be quiet and not like start screaming? Like I didn't do it. Like
I don't know.
That still happens today, though.
I know.
There's still-
That's what I'm saying.
There's a guy in death row in like Oklahoma or
there's a
something
ton
like
of
that. That just
people.
recently got stayed because the Supreme Court's like,
So
this looks
insane.
weird. Or,
how do you like mentally survive that?
Yeah, you
You
often
just
don't.
beat down. Yeah.
I watched a documentary. It was like a 15-minute thing about. Do you remember the 22-year-old student that went to North Korea?
Yes.
And he was like falsely accused for
New fear unlocked there.
like graffiti or something
Yeah, it was
like
graffiti,
that.
I think, yeah.
And he ended up he became brain dead. He made it back to the States,
Yeah, he
but
was dead, yeah.
he didn't ultimately.
in captivity when he was
Yeah,
treated.
they
Yeah.
like beat him.
I
But-
just
but
like
it's something like that. Like you literally go insane.
Yeah.
and you're in this space where you're like, I did not do this, and nope, in the space of not all the people who have the power over your sentence or over the rest of your life do not believe you, and no matter what you say, they're not going to believe
Well,
you. I
there
can't
was-
imagine what that feels like, and I think that's what I think about when I read this story.
Did you ever?
Jesus
so
feel like that?
I mean, and I'm not trying to get political here, but Russia has like improperly imprisoned Americans. They've got kind of a thing with that. And
Yes.
there was a Wall Street Journal reporter who was, and I've got the Wall Street Journal app, so they'd always kind of post updates. But they'd post pictures of dude like literally in a plexiglass cage in court, shackled up
I've seen that, yeah.
in the kangaroo court that was trumping up charges.
crazy.
And so imagine
Innocent.
Jesus like standing
Yes.
right there, like, but he wasn't freaking out. He
No.
wasn't trying to like file his appeals. He just
Right.
as a
I don't know
mouth,
how
as a lamb is silent before the shear.
And that's part of it too, the silence, is I think he was just like,
this has to happen.
this is happening now.
This is happening now.
Like once he got up from that prayer in the garden and stuff started happening, it was like, well, it's happening.
Yeah.
I asked for it not to happen. We talked about it. It's obviously happening. Here we go. What's Jesus going to do?
And I
Actually,
think
guys.
that's where you have to go, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in those types of moments where obviously not Jesus,
Right.
but it points back to the sheer and deep reliance on the will of the Father.
Yeah, sure.
yes.
That Jesus, in his divinity knew what was coming. But because he knew what was coming, he intentionally prepared for it. We don't know what's coming. But regardless, are we intentionally preparing in such a way that if something like this were to happen, it's almost like Joseph, the story of Joseph back in the day. Back in the day, because I was there, right? Back in the day,
a couple thousand years ago.
Technicolor Dreamcoat and all that. But it's true in that sense too, that these were all false charges. There was complete injustice, but there was a confidence in the will of the Father.
Yeah.
Not even that it would turn out okay,
right?
But that God and His presence would sustain through, and that's a real thing. Yeah. I think as a pastor, I can resonate with that a little bit, because there are certainly situations that you have to navigate where you have to bite your tongue, or there's a false accusation against you, or there's a 90% half truth against you, whatever. But in order for, if you will, the greater good, or the will of whatever it is, you choose to abstain from the comments that your flesh would want to make. And there's just this deep call to rely on your identity in Christ and the presence of God in your own life to sustain you through this. And I think it's a real lesson for all of us to
really good.
to consider that.
Where does our exoneration come from?
Oh, I like that.
Nice.
It's a good way to frame it.
Yeah,
it's not from our own words and from our there's a time and a place to speak up.
That's good.
There's probably more times than not to stay silent, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord.
Yeah.
So He'll sort it out.
Yeah.
That just sucks to have to wait for.
Yeah.
And trust that's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, and if we follow, this might be oversimplification because it's hard in those moments, but if we follow the thread of our own rebellion against God, we realize that the vindication of our own soul should be enough in every situation.
Right.
The fact that Jesus remained silent so that we don't need to stand against our own offenses against a holy God should be all that we need in any situation. Now, again, that's oversimplification because
but
it's difficult.
Vengeance was God's, and in our case, for those who love Jesus, vengeance was taken out on Jesus instead of us.
That's right.
So do we really need to take
we
every
can
opportunity?
stay silent because Jesus stayed silent on our behalf.
That's trippy. That's deep. I need to shut my mouth more.
Well, all right, let's move.
But I've known that.
I'll let Emily know.
Oh my gosh.
Nicole text Emily later. Here's what Mike said in the podcast.
All right, let's move from lies to something that's true. It's not ironic. It's just the only word I can think of. That the only thing that was actually said in a spirit of truth was the thing that ultimately let them condemn him. And it was ultimately true. So the way Sarah put it, which I thought was kind of cool, is like, so obviously he's not just saying, and if anybody wants to go deeper on this, please feel free. He's not just saying, I'm the Messiah. He's saying, I'm the Messiah and you're going to see me exalted as God. And they may have all been waiting for a Messiah, but they weren't all waiting for a Messiah who said he was God. And I thought that was like a really cool way to put that. Because unless you have that understanding and more understanding around these things, it can seem weird that they all of a sudden get real riled up.
I think
because
like that.
It's a different, he's saying all of it. Do you know what I mean?
If he said he was the Messiah, they'd have been like, great.
Yeah, here we go.
Lock him up, let's do this.
We know. Like,
but then they tore their clothes.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus brings new charges against himself.
Exactly.
In that moment.
And the only truth statement probably said that whole night.
Yeah. He's being tried for claiming to be the Messiah. Jesus himself is saying, I'm not just the anointed one of Israel. I am Yahweh himself.
If it was my personality, and thank God he's not, my posture would be like, let me just let them worry about this for 2 hours and argue about it until I say the thing I'm going to actually say.
Second guy is like,
you thought that was bad? Well, listen to this. You were mad before? Yeah.
And there is objectively, if I was in the Sanhedrin, but I hadn't seen what Mark showed us, I hadn't witnessed it. I hadn't come to know it to be true. Mm-hmm. I mean, objectively, that seems like that's one heck of a statement for someone to make. And so if an uninformed person, I probably would vote.
Like, okay, it's gone too far.
Yeah.
It's officially gone too far.
We do need to take care of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
However, we have the revelation of God. We have the life of Jesus. So we can't claim ignorance, which I think is what Sarah's trying to say when she's either a liar or he's telling the truth. We can't claim ignorance as someone may have been able to, and that's the decision we have to make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what do you do in the face of truth in our moments in our lives today? Because I feel that as a challenge, it's easy for us to not stand with, or to buckle under the pressure, but also not remain open. So I have, this phrase that I say that I always want to remain a student. I always want to be teachable. And that's not that I throw everything out. I've got my own values. I've got my own theology. I've got my own standards. But I at least always want to have a listening ear, not with my presuppositions, not through that lens. But if we get to a place in our life where we're not welcoming even the opportunity to learn from someone, then I think we've automatically moved into a place of error. And that's obviously here what is happening with the Sanhedrin. That there's just no opportunity for Jesus to even explain himself. There's just a outcry of blasphemy. Even though Jesus has a track record for the last 3 years that is really undeniable. It's not as if you could even pawn him off as a cult leader, because of the stuff that you're seeing, and it's not like he's Benny Hinning it, where he can manufacture these things in these big, large settings. I mean,
and it wasn't like they were taking in $1 bazillion and living off of.
He's living poverty.
They're camping.
Yeah, he's got no money. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So there's just this like real.
We talked about pausing last week. They didn't pause.
Oh yeah, good.
To actually evaluate, they just
jumped.
There's probably a powder keg in there.
Yeah.
That was probably insane.
It would have been.
I'm trying to think of what today's equivalent of like ripping the robes would be.
Congress sitting down.
Or those like Parliament ones that get all crazy.
Oh yeah,
English Parliament.
Yeah, that place is
we
wild.
need a little taste of that in American politics.
We're stoic over there until you get into the Parliament.
That's insane.
I love that crap. Let's do it. Here.
I thought it was very cool, and I think we should talk about this. At the end, Sarah flips a turn of phrase, and the question isn't were there lies, were there truth? The question is Jesus a liar, or is Jesus the truth? And I think that's the actual crux of the question.
And that's not a question. I think it's easy to default, especially in our Western mindsets. Salvation is just a decision, and then it's like I make it and then I'm good or whatever. But that question isn't a salvation question. Isn't only a salvation question. That question is an everyday pick up your cross question. Like I'm sitting here, and I'm choosing to believe the truth of Jesus instead of the lie that the world is trying to tell me. Like that's not for like come be a Christian question. That is a Christian. That is your question every day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And there is no, I mean, it's been said before, but there's no neutral. You don't get to plead the fifth, if you will, on a question like this. The admonition of that, the non-answering, and it's an answer. It's I'm going to choose the lie instead of the truth, because to accept the truth has huge ramifications, on our entire life. We can't say what Jesus is saying is actually true and then remain the same.
Right.
I just don't see that as something that is possible.
I agree.
And I think that ought to serve as a challenge, and that's ultimately what Sarah was getting at as well, right? If we are claiming him to be the truth, then we either look in the mirror and say, is our life reflecting that? Can
I love Jesus but be incredibly anxious about the next step in my life? Like, can I love Jesus but not like tithe the resources God's given me? Can I love Jesus but not step into this moment that my neighbor is having and ask to pray for them? Like, it's a simple question, but out of that question comes infinite like reverberations, opportunities that we're not going to be perfect at, but this question has implications all over our lives, and we just want to boil it down and then sidestep it naturally, but that's not how that works.
No. Yeah, right.
How is that realization in your lives? Mm-hmm. Can you guys think of a particular moment where you were maybe you felt like you wanted to remain silent, or even you were, faced with the truth of Jesus, you made a decision for Jesus, and was there could you compare a situation, BC, to a situation, they're similar situations, but because you've accepted the truth of Jesus, it changed how you operated in a particular setting?
Yeah, I think I think I'm realizing as I get to know myself, I've got a bit of an anxious streak in me, and I can kind of make narratives up, and I can kind of fixate on things or decisions, or, and that's always been a tendency, BC, to a whatever, the other side. But now and again, through some counseling and through different, learning some tools in my toolbox, when I get confronted with a situation that takes my all my mental capacity, and it's bleeding beyond the appropriate boundaries, but into my thought pattern, my thought life. There's a kind of a tool that a counselor taught me. Is the lie is I need to think about this right now. The truth is I've already done everything I can do for it. Or the truth is this is a problem for tomorrow and not today. And again, if Jesus is true, and Jesus has told us, don't worry about tomorrow, will worry about itself. Today's trouble is enough for today. If he's taking care of the flowers and the birds. And if I believe that, then in this anxious moment, I need to choose to believe that Jesus is the truth, and either set that aside or just rest in the fact that I've done all that I could and the outcome's up to God. And so that's a pattern that I am very marginal at best at implementing in my own life, but I try to.
But aware of.
Yeah, I think mine is one of many themes would be this sufficiency theme, everything's fine. And I think before I knew Jesus and before I was getting to know Jesus, that looked like just spiraling, anxiety, could be depression sometimes, just because I was performatively putting stuff on and then just dealing with the ramifications of that alone. And so because I was trying to just put up this facade for whatever reason. And I think just, it's still same as you, it's still this work in progress, but I feel like it's just so different now than it was then, because, and I still slip into it. Even when I went through this recent cancer thing, I still slipped into just it's fine. Everything's fine. And it 100% wasn't fine. But I think what I learned in that thing in particular was just I diminished his power because I acted like it was nothing. I acted like the whole process was nothing. Wow. And so for me, again, it's just a sanctification thing. I feel like as I learn more about myself and I put myself or find myself in situations where that comes out, hopefully it's getting better and better. And hopefully I'm getting better at realizing it, even if it's a minute later, or maybe it won't take me 10 years this time to figure it out, but it's all rooted in lies. All that stuff is rooted in just lies I believe about myself, lies I believe about people around me, my environment, whatever. And if I can rest in the truth of not only who God is, but who he has told me I am, then that takes me way farther.
Yeah. That's really good. I think that a scripture like this, an event in scripture like this, has huge applications in that moment. Yeah. Because it's almost like when we're faced with those moments, thinking back to Jesus being on trial in one of his deepest and darkest moments as a human being, it can help us know how to apply, because there's so many lies that even Jesus himself could have believed in that moment, by the most learned group of people representing God's chosen people in that moment. So there's so many lies that we can choose, but when we think back to Jesus being on trial and Jesus refusing to buy into the common lies that are told about him or that are told about us, we can choose to lean in on what Jesus did, and he proclaimed truth, and he actually pointed back to himself and the sovereign plan of God. And he trusted in that. So that's always been a helpful application in my own life. I don't do it perfectly, for sure.
That's good.
But one thing I was going to mention as well is I think it's really helpful. I asked the BC and the sort of AD comparisons of our situations is to have those sort of written down so that we can reference those or just reflect on them. Like, crap, how did I deal with this when I didn't know Jesus, or when I was just getting to know Jesus, you know? And you go, oh, whoa. Again, we've talked about 1% change, even if it's 1% different. Like, let's celebrate that.
Yeah.
We've leaned closer towards the truth of Christ in that moment, who he is, what he did for us, as opposed to the lie that we chose to believe.
We can mourn the sin that continues in our lives while still celebrating the progress.
Good, Mike.
Even in those sinful failures, like there's confession and there's repentance, but that doesn't, just because you're still caught in a cycle of sin doesn't mean you can't do exactly that. Yeah. Look back and go, holy crap, look how far God has brought me. Dang it, if we got this far, man, how much further can me and the Holy Spirit get? And celebrating and using that as a motivating, it's not a either or. We can both mourn our sin, but also celebrate where Jesus has brought us.
Yeah, that's great.
Good. So Pastor Sarah basically left us with a different form of that question, and that we can ask ourselves as Christians, and we can use even as a conversation starter with people who aren't, is the question, what if it is true? What if all of this is true? And I don't know if you guys have experience with this. I probably should have asked to share this, but I'm not going to. It's too late. So my dad grew up Catholic. Once we were in the picture, he never went. We grew up Lutheran. It's Catholic adjacent. But he never came with us.
Luther would not say that.
No, he wouldn't. But the experience is, I'll say that.
The modern American experience. But that is funny.
I know. He's literally like, what? What did I do? So he never came with us to church, whatever. And he always was like, I did my time. He went to Catholic school. He did the whole thing, And he came to Grace because of my niece, who was like a toddler at the time and wanted to come. And that was weird enough. But then we had this Good Friday thing. In one of the rooms, it was like this experiential thing. And one of the rooms was centered around this question, what if it's true? And he literally, and this is weird, you think people in your life are they've thought everything through. They're capable. They know all the things. But he literally had never even thought to think that.
Whoa. Like this whole
Catholic upbringing, all this stuff. He never thought what if this is true? It was just so rote and didn't mean anything. And so anyway, I'm just saying that, and that started him on this whole spiritual awakening, believer, all the things. So I just say that as an encouragement to say it seems like a very simple question.
Yeah.
But it's not a simple question. And if it hits somebody right or hits you right, on a day, I feel like God can use it. I've seen God use it, just a simple thing like that.
But there's enough people and enough books and enough things that are trying to disprove the Christian faith.
Yeah. But pretend it's real.
But to give due diligence to, what if it was real?
Yeah.
What would
it mean?
Does that mean?
Yeah, it's worth the time following the logic.
Exactly.
If you ask that question.
Exactly.
What if it is true? Follow the logic.
Yeah, do the work.
Just entertain it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Take an hour.
Yeah.
What if it is true? Then what are the implications, the ramifications of a question like that? Because I think, not to sound like 1980s or 1990s Christian Billy Graham crusade movements, which I'm not knocking, but you're gonna have to wrestle with that question at some point in your life.
Yeah.
Whether you do it now or whether you do it when you breathe your last breath, the what if it was true is going to be a lingering question that you're going to have to reconcile at some point.
Yeah.
It's best to do it now,
Yeah.
figure it out, not just from a eternal security standpoint, but from a identity standpoint, from a life to its
today.
fullest
Yep.
standpoint. Heaven on earth standpoint,
Yep.
thy kingdom come standpoint, all of those
Yeah,
things.
that's good.
Wrestle through that, because you could indeed actually have reconciled with the fact that Jesus is Lord and Savior, but have not really wrestled that question,
Right.
and just choose a faded version of your life anyway until you breathe your last breath.
Yeah.
And that is even more, potentially
sad.
even more of a tragedy
Yeah.
than one who doesn't wrestle with it until they actually breathe their last.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And honestly, even if you wrestle with the question, come to the conclusion that this isn't true, but if you follow that
least you
logic, and
followed
then
it.
you got my I have more respect for agnostics, atheists, whatever you want, theists who have been like, this Jesus thing, I've thought it through and it's not, than for a professing Christian who's never thought it
Yeah.
through. I have more
That's
respect for the
good,
person
yeah.
who's actually gone the distance
I can agree with
and
that.
entertained it. Even if I disagree with their outcome, hey, homie, at least you went for it.
Yeah. It just wasn't right. We don't need to get into why, but yeah. Okay, if you like today's episode,
Don't say.
let us know. You can go to whoisgrace.com/Mark for resources. Thanks for joining us. We only have a couple more of these.